Hello and welcome to Thoughts in the Green Room with your host, Geoff Mays. This is the interview series, and I am here with Birnie of Lucrative Burrito Productions.
Lucrative Burrito Productions, Silly Goose Times Productions. There's too many to count.
All right.
They've been made up, yeah.
Yeah, a number of them. For those of you who don't know, let me introduce Lucas. He is a writer, a director, and a sound mixer. He is currently at work. I love this. For a man who's fresh out of school, pretty much, folks. He is currently at work completing his post-production on his first independent feature film, Werewolf. It's a horror comedy, and it was crowdfunded through Kickstarter.
That it was, yeah.
Yes. Now I was around when you launched that campaign, and I know a little bit about that campaign. It's this much, but I'm curious. I got a lot of friends who have done the Kickstarter thing, and some of them made a little bit of money, some of them made a little bit more money. But yourself, you made a decent amount of money in order that you could put towards this film and make this film happen. What's it like running off of a crowd-funded campaign? Like, how did you do it to get the return on it?
Well, I think the main thing, or the one thing that I guess surprised me right off the bat would have been that, like, you think, like you're saying, like, I've had friends that have done campaigns, I know acquaintances, what have you, that have all tried their hand at it, and to varying degrees of success. And what I thought was, or what, like I said, what surprised me the most about it was how much work really goes into something like that. Like, it seems on the surface, or, from the outside, pretty simple. You have an idea, you come up with something. In our case, you put together a little teaser clip, a little 3-minute short, kind of reflecting the tone or the feel of the film, depending on what you're doing. But yeah, you have your idea and you sort of put it out there and then cross your fingers, hope for the best. But what I was surprised by was how much work goes into even the smallest things, like graphic design on tabs and things. So like when you're banners, things like that, just things to draw the eye and keep it to a certain degree, like a degree of production value to keep people interested. If it's just a wall of text, that's completely unappealing compared to dividing things up into sections and breaking it down, like having pie charts for budgets and things like that. Even just crew bios, or if you're lucky enough to have cast at that point, little background and things like that. So I think that was the main thing, was just how much really. I remember spending, I think it was like a month straight, just photoshopping little things like that and working on these little things that you think are sort of throwaway, but in the long run really do amount to something that, at the end of the day, like, surprises you. how much value it can really add.
Right.
Yeah.
Now hearing all of that, it leads the positive theory, and I can see it happening in today's world. Is it possible that somebody could start a business on "I will help you get a successful crowdfunded campaign"?
Absolutely. That's. If the movie doesn't do well, which
it's going to.
It will. But no, if all else fails, that's definitely what I've been looking into. Is I could put that expertise, that experience to good use.
Right.
Because I definitely think that if someone hasn't already cornered the market, come on, guys, get to it. It's right there. It's ready for the taking.
Absolutely. And if not, you may be the first to do so.
Yeah.
I hope that isn't the case, knowing that Werewolf is very close to its completion point. And I'll come to that in a second. I want to finish off a thought around the crowdfunded campaign. Yeah. Was all that generated by yourself, or did you have a team that helped contribute to it, work with you on it? What was that level like?
It's sort of... I would say team, but it's interesting. It was broken down almost into 3 or more kind of chunks. Sort of the initiation of the whole thing was just me sort of thinking, oh, well, I have this idea, I have this script written, I want to do, like I said, the teaser clip to sort of have something to bank on and to help kind of propel the campaign forward. But then it was bringing in team members to sort of assist with the different... figuring out the different layers, the different additive things, like what rewards are we going to do, and how should we format things, what should we kind of put our focus on in terms of the campaign's structure, I guess, would be, like sort of like how should we just everything up front, or should we kind of dull information out slowly? Should we just, like I said, break things up into different categories? And then, like I said, with rewards, it's like, okay, well, I mean, obviously we're going to give out copies of the film, but do we do the standard, do we do t-shirts, do we do posters, like where do we go with, and then also thinking like, okay, well, if we do t-shirts, how much is that going to cost, and things like that. So sort of, bringing in other like-minded people to sort of break it down and think about how exactly to put all these pieces together and come up with something that works.
And did those people all transfer over into people who ended up working on the film itself?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, obviously there were just a few kind of periphery friends of friends who had to go their separate ways for whatever reasons, but the core crew
stayed
pretty much the
absolutely
same.
Now, Werewolf is the current and the primary project, but it's not the first time you've written a script.
No,
so let's talk about some script writing.
I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So what was before Werewolf in terms of script writing? Because I'm under the impression you're going to have to correct myself and the viewers on my next statement if I'm wrong, that script writing is the foundation of your creativity.
No, I'd say you're right. He's right.
Wow, look at that! I'm right. Yay!
But yeah, no, I think. I mean, it's kind of cliche, but it is one of those things where I've always been drawn to that aspect, like, of just storytelling. So for it all of my interest in filmmaking and whatever kind of stems from how it services storytelling, how it services narrative. And I mean, like, there are people that I've met, and I'm sure you have too, that run into, whether it's in the industry or on indie projects, that have that kind of mindset of everything needs to service the story, everything needs to center around the narrative, and that being the key. Which, I'd say, like, screenwriting has been that driving force, that interest that has brought me, I guess, full circle, even though I feel like you said, we're pretty early on, so I don't want to say that the loop has necessarily closed all the way yet. But and with screenwriting, I remember even back in university, prior to when we met, coming up with ideas, jotting down short ideas, ideas for like music videos, whatever else kind of nonsense, silly YouTube skits, from high school, things like that. Things that definitely, like, in hindsight, I probably wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but yeah.
You've got to have those ideas that you're never going to touch to hone the ideas that you will touch.
Exactly,
right?
And I think that with Werewolf, I think it's kind of like that perfect storm, like you just said, having all these goofy ideas and kind of developing a style, and then having it all kind of culminate in the epitome of goof, which is Werewolf.
Okay. I promise we're coming to the Werewolf point. We're not letting this go. But sticking with some of those ideas.
Yeah.
Prior to Werewolf, what other major script pieces have you written or contributed, worked on? And I know, again, I say this again to the audience, I say this because I have admiration for this. You're relatively fresh out of school. We're under 3 years time frame since you're out of school, and you're already, in a short while, going to be putting out a feature film that will hopefully do its circuit, land somewhere, get a release, direct-to-video distribution, something that's outside of sitting on your shelf.
Yeah.
Right? So what are some of the other projects that you've put into as a scriptwriter?
Well, there were... I mean, obviously, I feel like we'll just start from as the top with your experience with Legendary, which was a 10-minute short film I did when I was at Sheridan in the Advanced Television and Filmmaking program, and that was sort of my first foray into, I guess, quote unquote proper screenwriting.
Okay.
Prior to that, like I said, just sort of goofy skits and short videos that definitely. If they were put under that same scrutiny that Legendary was in school, wouldn't hold up, wouldn't hold their merit. But with that, like I said, 10-minute short film about it was sort of like, it was Rocky, but imagine instead of boxing, it's the competitive eating sphere, and Geoff was in it as our lovely coach. With that. I think that was sort of the first foray, like I said, into proper structure, and then from there I've just sort of, it was from that working on other things in school that sort of still fall into that same category. There was a fun little sci-fi film that I wrote, which is still sitting on a shelf somewhere. Not sure what to do with it, but it was called Brobots. It was sort of like a buddy, buddy kind of road trip sci-fi movie, I guess you could call it. but things like that. And then since school, it's just been I've jumped into obviously writing Werewolf, which was, you know, treatments and things that I had assistants kind of coming up with structure and beat sheets and all that in school. But after that, I've just sort of lended my story editing assistance to certain, like a couple web series of some friends that I'm not entirely sure if they've actually done anything with. So, and then just a couple other short horror films where basically I became, in sort of my circle of friends, I just became the guy where if someone had an idea, they'd be like, hey, Lucas, can you just, again, make sure the structure's there, make sure it makes sense, and then obviously I'd have to rip it apart and we'd build it back up. But yeah, things like that.
Nice. And for Werewolf, you're also the director.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is it the first time you directed?
Well, I mean, again, like, in terms of, if we're talking about kind of proper direction with a crew and a budget, yes. In terms of making something, no. But yeah, if to have something that you actually want to be like, this was directed by me, I'd say yes.
Okay. I like the way you're qualifying certain things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I've done that, but you really don't want to look at that stuff. But we have to, again, I completely believe.
I definitely think it's all valuable.
Yes.
And like you said, like, it's all learning. But I mean, yeah, in terms of just, I feel like, yeah, to define things properly is the main like hurdle to get over. Because like I said, directing, I feel like a lot of people, they just get an idea of what a director is doing, or, you know what I mean? But there's so much more to it, and there's so much less to it in some capacities. So I think in terms of proper direction, yes. But.
Right. I always think about the moment in your future when things are going well and you've got, you know, magazine ads, articles about you and so forth, and that super fan who finds all the stuff that you've just said, yeah, you don't really want to see that, and strings it together.
Well, hopefully it's buried, you know what I mean, deep in the internet somewhere. But if they do their digging, I'm sure they will find it.
The years before.
Yeah.
An ode to, or what was that? A roast to Lucas Birnie.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's definitely what I'm looking forward to, is the roast when that comes around.
Yes. So let's talk about Werewolf, because that's the big project, obviously. What was the inspiration for the story itself?
So yeah, I'm glad you asked this, and I didn't know he was going to ask this beforehand. But this is, I think it sort of should summarize everything perfectly. Is I, you know, have always had an affinity for B movies, you know, like the kind of sci-fi horror, the kind of genres that aren't necessarily winning all the Oscars and other festival. I can't know what's the one from Cannes, the Golden.
Oh,
I know, and I'm sure there's people in the comments that are just freaking out.
Yes,
but they're not winning the prestige awards. So I've always had this affinity for those types of movies, and obviously, therefore, the natural conclusion is, well, I should write my own. And I remember the moment the idea came to me. So as I said with Legendary, kind of. The idea is always to take something that people are familiar with, and I always like to kind of juxtapose it or twist it, flip it on its head. And I was thinking to myself, like, I would love to do a werewolf movie. I've always had, again, an affinity for movie monsters, and that's been the one that's kind of always been in the forefront. So I was thinking, yeah, I'd love to do a werewolf movie, something a la American Werewolf in London. And then I was thinking, but how can I do something that hasn't been done before? How can I do something that isn't just going to be the Canadian American Werewolf in London sort of thing? And then I was sort of like, I was thinking, well, what is sort of the opposite of a wolf? And then you get into, well, a sheep, because, you know,
sheep and wolves clothing.
Hunt sheep and wolves clothing, exactly. Yeah. And then so I'm thinking, well, all right, if we're gonna go down this road, which, you know, fully bags are packed, I'm in the car, I'm ready to go down the road. I was like, yeah, we should just do something like that. And so again, that's sort of sitting in the back of my mind. And I was out with some friends, and I got to give full credit to him, Kevin. You know, if you see this, we were out just. This was like over the summer between years of school, and we're just out hanging out doing the typical suburban kid thing. Got nothing to do, driving aimlessly, and then we just start talking about like leaving, like, do you remember leaving, like, because I mean, I feel it's a generational thing, but I don't think I've left a voicemail message for somebody in years, at least years, if not almost a decade, you know?
Yeah.
So we're kind of thinking, like, do you remember having an answering machine? And I mean, like, my parents still have an answering machine, but do you remember checking your answering machine? Do you remember, like, when people would leave you messages, or, like, can you imagine getting, like, a really weird romantic message on your answering machine, you know, like a significant other calling your house and leaving just like a really odd lovey-dovey sort of message, and then so it keeps dovetailing as you do when you're just riffing with your buddies, and it dovetails into this joke, which was the lightning bolt, which was this guy leaving this message, and he's just like, babe, are you home? Babe, pick up the phone. Babe, and he just keeps exaggerating, and so the joke of it there is that he just kind of starts doing this sheepish this kind of over the phone on the message, and then that's when the two sort of pieces came together, and I was like, that's going to be the crux of the movie. That gag right there is going to be what cements these two ideas, and then so therefore the idea, obviously it became larger than that because it had to become a feature-length script, but sort of that one gag and the idea that it's a sheep instead of a wolf just sort of helped bridge everything, and then put all the pieces together. Like, everything else was just sort of, okay, well, if this is going to be a horror movie, we need, you know, these characters, we need these elements, we need this and this to happen. So
off of this idea of a guy, if you will, transforming on the voicemail
transforming
into a sheep.
in exactly. And then the other thing to explain that a little further was also, like, knowing that to make this movie, you know, especially being out of school, I mean, at the point that the ideas came together and started developing it, I had just been starting Sheridan, so I just kind of graduated from one program, going into a postgraduate program, and thinking, like, yeah, this would be great to make. Obviously, knowing the parameters of Sheridan, doing something that long forms just, you know, out of the question. They don't have the budget for it, but keeping that in mind of, like, budgetary constraints, and then applying that to, well, if he transforms, but he transforms over the phone, then we don't see him transform, then that saves us a lot of money for having to do it, you know? So just kind of putting those little pieces together as well, and just kind of crafting the quote-unquote perfect indie horror scenario for
which we are looking forward to seeing in the very near future. Now, I know that you went through some personal struggle to get here in terms of making the film. What was among the many other things that any artist faces trying to make any of their brainchilds? You made a huge decision. In the work aspect of life.
Oh, absolutely.
And I understand, if I recall our conversation well, that you put work completely aside and went full time. Like, this is it. What was that like, coming to that decision for yourself? How challenging, or maybe not challenging at all, was that moment when you're like, this is it. I'm doing this. Forget it. I'm an artist, and I'm going to go give it a go.
I feel like, interestingly enough, it was kind of both. You know, like it seems like a no-brainer. It seems not challenging to just be like, well, we did it. We got the funding. We have the idea. We have, you know, the crew roughly together. Like, this is it. This is perfect. But there was also just that kind of uncertainty of being at that point, at that crux of, we just got it, you know, like we the day after the okay comes through, and it's like, all right, how do I do this? Is this the best decision, really? Like, you know, it's not at that point when it's been like 12 hours since the campaign ended. It's like, it's not too late to just refund everybody, right? Like, we could just, you know, but yeah, I think it was challenging in the sense of the, like, prior to getting into a solid pre-production, it was just that uncertainty of is this the smartest mover, you know? Is this the right move to be making at this point, especially being so recently out of school and having, you know, been working to pay off student loans and whatnot, and just kind of thinking, well, it's now or never. Like, if I don't do this now, then it's probably never going to happen again. So yeah, it was definitely a solid week of thinking, but at the end of it, I feel like it was kind of, we go from being uncertain and feeling like it's a challenge to eventually coming to that realization,
right,
and making that snap decision to just
that idea of facing the fear, if, you know, to
qualify
it in a simple word, facing the fear of stepping away from the norm.
Absolutely.
In order to pursue what is not traditionally socially acceptable. You know, the majority of the people out there are saying, you know, get your 9 to 5, pay off your loans, go to work day in, day out. Artists in general face that challenge all the time. How do you balance your art with the need to pay rent?
Absolutely,
and everything like that. Do you think, and I'm putting myself in your shoes, I got a couple of years on you, and I think that, you know, for me to pick up and walk away from job at this time to pursue something that would be potentially more daunting, maybe not, only potentially more daunting than what you faced. And I asked the question, do you think that your ability to make that choice comes from being fresh out of school, being younger at the start of your career versus halfway through, or part further down, you know?
Yeah, no, I think so. I think that's something that sort of just rang, you know, that constant nagging, when you weigh out the pros and the cons. When I was looking at everything sort of written down, it was like, having this opportunity this early, and not taking it would almost put, like, other people who would have, you know, taken that, you know, like you're saying, like people who are midway through their career or just have, you know, a decade on me, they'd be looking at me like you're a fool, because like I said, you might not get this chance ever again. So I definitely agree with that sentiment.
Fair, very fair. And congratulations on capitalizing on opportunity that I'm sure many have been in the same situation where they've gone for the traditional route and gone for the safety. It's a daunting task to be an artist in general. Anybody who watches this, many of them are artists, many of them are not. But for those who can directly relate as artists, it's a challenging thing to say, I'm being an artist, not what society expects. Right? So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you.
A well-achieved piece. Now, you've also, I guess I want to get to. I think it's obvious, but maybe it's not. What is Werewool about?
Well, all right. Let me pull out my script here. We'll start on page
what's your
1.
log line?
No, our log line. Werewool is the story of Max Pemberton is our main character. He's our lead, and he's just your everyday sort of schmuck. And you know, he's gone. Ironically, this kind of connects to what we're talking about. He's gone the opposite route. He's gone the 9 to 5. I need to make ends meet. I need to settle into something route, and he's not happy with that. So when push comes to shove, you know, there's that inciting incident that occurs, ironically, with his in-laws, just kind of judging him for his, you know, lack of gumption or spine, I guess, in certain. But it's sort of, so there's an inciting incident, and then basically what happens is through no fault of his own necessarily, but basically he ends up diving headfirst into something that's completely outside of what he could have expected or could have anticipated, and things go wrong in the small, quaint little town of LaFontaine.
Lovely. And of course the rest translates out to no, I wouldn't say stereotypical by any means, but in terms of the structure, then becomes your standard
I definitely agree.
Film.
Yeah, generic, right? in terms of the beats, exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean, if you've seen one werewolf film, I think you've seen them all, and I mean, I think you guys are going to be excited when it finally does come out to see Geoff here hunting down Max as he, you know, wreaks havoc on the town as Sheriff O'Shaughnessy needs to track him down and solve this issue, you know.
Thank you for the small one. Yes, I do have a role in the film, and it was a great time on set. But you strike for me this idea of a philosophical thought. You said that, and you aptly said, you know, touched on Max Pemberton's plight, if you will, is in contrast to what we just talked about, you taking against that. Do you think at some level the writing of Werewool had a subconscious aspect to it that shared that out?
I definitely think so. I think it reflected pretty much, you know, of course, there's the typical writer-director or just screenwriter thing of putting yourself in the film. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I, you know, am the lead character of the film. I think there's aspects of kind of my personality. You can kind of plot them on a graph of who certain chunks fit with certain characters. Right. But I think that idea was definitely something that while writing it kind of towards the tail end of my academic career was just that, a fear kind of in the back of my head of what if all this is for naught and I go down this other path, will I be satisfied, will I be happy, whatever. And then there's definitely an element of that is being brought up in the film.
40 years later, you wake up and you're still in the mailroom of IBM, exactly. hoping to God you get bitten by a werewolf to change life.
Yes.
Making the film itself, let's come to that. First big film, you worked on Legendaries. You said you had a couple of the little things in the process of schooling and whatnot, so it's not like you were like fresh to a camera, fresh to a crew. But in terms of this venture, for all intents and purposes, your first project, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What were some of the challenges you faced?
Oof. How long we got?
Well,
I think
pick your top challenge.
I think the biggest one. I mean, it's kind of it's a toss up between two different things. The main one would have definitely been budgeting, and I think that kind of falls to time and actual finances. Just figuring out how to balance everything within the constraints that we had. But I think also the other main challenge was just being able to keep that headspace and that kind of cone of vision, if that makes any sense. That sort of those blinders on, and you're seeing the end result. You're seeing how all the pieces will eventually fit together. How they, so seeing it like that, and over the course of our production, coming back to it each time and kind of, okay, where do we leave off? All right, what do we need from this? And just constantly bringing yourself back and just seeing the bigger picture somehow, even though you're splitting it up into all those individual chunks. So I think,
I'm going to add to that because I something the audience doesn't know that I do know is that you ended up having to shoot this rather than over 2 or 3 months because of the change in the weather. You had to put on hold for 7-8 months before we got back to good weather to shoot.
Our production. So originally, and again, this all falls under challenges. Originally, we obviously wanted to do the right thing. We wanted to do a 3-week production, or maybe a little more, depending on how things played out. But in the fall, just get everything done in a proper shooting block, and then spend however much time we need to do in post. But then we ran into issues of scheduling certain locations or scheduling certain actors or certain things like that. So eventually what we decided to do was to break it up and to basically shoot. Usually you get 6 days on, 1 day off. We were doing the exact opposite. We were 6 days off, 1 day on. And so we had to make sure we got most of our exteriors done. We originally planned to do all of them, but again, things don't go as planned. So we had to do that for about 2, almost 3 months, and then the weather shifted. So we decided to take our holiday break and enjoy some time with family, friends, and then get back to it in the new year. Do interiors because obviously it looks completely different. There's snow everywhere. That's not how we shot our exteriors. And then once the weather shifted again, come back to it and wrap up those exteriors. So
So again, congratulations. You said keeping the cone, the cone of vision. I like that term. I'm going to steal that forever now. The cone of vision.
The cone of vision.
But you had to maintain that sight line for the length of a winter.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And that, I imagine, can play psychologically, challenges all sorts of aspects that way. So again, congratulations, because you held the vision. Again, as somebody who was on the film with you, working on it as an actor, that time frame for myself even was I want to get back to this, but what happens if? What if I get a big offer? How do we fit around that? And I'm sure you played out some of those scenarios over the time.
In those weeks. In those weeks when we weren't doing anything, it was like, well, the 6 days have gone by and we're supposed to be shooting, but we have nothing. And there'd be those days where I'd be racking my brain about, because that was the other kind of pillar. Like we had sort of, I made it clear to the crew, and hopefully I think like the cast, obviously they got the same vibe, but it was sort of like the main things that are important are everybody's safety, everybody's kind of happiness and attitude on set, right? We want to make sure everybody's fed, everybody's satisfied and not feeling like they're being like used in any way that isn't appropriate to what is going on. And then the other last one was just making sure that we accommodate everybody as best we can. Like obviously if I could, I would, like I said, have 3 weeks of shooting and that's it, and everybody come in, out, all right, great, you're wrapped, we'll see you later. But since that wasn't the case, it was like, all right, well, we got to roll with the punches now. We got to make sure that if Geoff, for instance, he has a gig that comes up, it's like, all right, well, then we'll shift. Like, it was just this Google Calendar that was just constantly being adjusted. It was like, all right, well, if he's working here, then we'll just put that there and put that instead, and just make sure that we have those props or whatever we need for that, or double check with our location, something like that.
And you achieved all of that, truly. Everything that you just laid out there, all those points,
somehow,
were absolutely achieved. Congratulations on that. And now we are, I imagine, about... I'm not going to put a timeline on it because there's no pressure. We are close to you having a locked, finished, and product to show the world. So we've come from all of that to just about there. Just about there. And you guys can be looking for Werewolf. That'll come across my feeds, of course, Lucas's feeds, of course, once it's ready to go, so that you can take a look at it. I've got one last question for you. Your favorite B movie?
Ooh. It's a tough one. You ever seen Samurai Cop?
I think I have. I actually think I have. I say I think because it's probably really low in that B movie that I don't remember it very well.
Yeah. No, Samurai Cop, for those that don't know, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a
Samurai
Cop.
All right. Lucas Birnie's favorite B movie, officially launched here, Samurai Cop. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our time here on Thoughts from the Green Room, the interview series. Your host, Geoff Mays, of course. And thank you to the wonderful, talented Lucas Birnie.
Thank you, Geoff.
Take a look. You're welcome. Take a look for all of the posts that will be soon out to launch Werewolf. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a few weeks.